Urban environment, the habitat value, and Matt works for Seattle Audubon, and he's a conservation director, and he has a very strong background in community planning. I don't know about organizing, and he's also chair of the Seattle Urban Forestry Commission.
Right. Great, thanks folks. Our offices are right up the street, as everyone knows, and I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, and I realize I haven't been around for a while, so it's cool getting running around doing a lot of different things. I remember the last time I was in this room was talking about a little tree meeting after the Merlin fund went around, when people are tracking the Merlins and looking at the Merlins in the Victoria Heights neighborhood and Meadowbrook neighborhood and other neighborhoods. It's really cool, so we can talk about that a little after. But we talked about trees on that night. We had a plant amnesty volunteer arborist here talking about taking care of your trees. And it was a really fun meeting. We had quite a few folks here. So this is the first time back since then. Tonight, we are here talking about the ordinance, but there's two other speakers that are talking about the ordinance as well. I have an action alert that I sent out to my members yesterday, so I can share that with you all. But I'm going to talk about some fun stuff early on, and not just about the ordinance, and some of the ways that Seattle Audubon's engaging folks in the urban forest in some of those fun kind of ways. So hopefully I'll kick it off with some interesting stuff. I am going to try to cover three things: some introduction and foundation comments, talk a little bit about, as I just said, the fun stuff, and particularly Canopy Connections, which is a project we launched about 2 years ago. We just have an AmeriCorps service member who started last week. We're really trying to amp up that project. So after this meeting or later on, contact me. I think there's a lot of opportunities for neighbors and neighborhoods to get engaged in this effort, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And I'm not going to talk too much about the tree ordinance, but obviously I've been eating, sleeping, living, breathing, talking about living in the urban forest. So any questions we can touch on, and I will have maybe a few slides if we have time to talk about the urban forest. So Seattle Audubon in general, our mission is to cultivate and lead a community that values and protects birds and the natural environment. Kind of high level mission. What I really like is our tagline: we connect people to birds. So for me that means we're not just about saving the spotted owl to save the spotted owl. We want you all to engage and fall in love with and understand the life histories and want to save the spotted owl. And I think the same thing goes for trees. A lot of what I am up here as an advocate is an advocate to have everyone kind of understand the value of trees, fall in love with the trees, understand what they mean to our neighborhoods. Therefore, we don't have to have regulations that hit people over the head. People get it, people understand it, and the regulations really focus on getting to those bad people, the people who are going to do the wrong thing, that we can kind of get to them. So it's kind of that balance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. And the reason why I like Seattle Audubon's tagline is this is my favorite quote we talk about all the time. When we tug at a single thing in nature, we find it attached to the rest of the world. And I think that's a really simple message, and we're talking to a lot of folks that are in the know with all you guys, but think about that. We really are what I think of as we're interconnected with the nature, and we're part of nature. We're not separate from it. And I think that simple message doesn't get across all the time. And there's a lot of examples where I hear all the time at Seattle Audubon, I love nature, but why can't the swallows go nest somewhere else? So we try to put these kind of human attitudes on animals and things, and we need to learn to live within that dark dynamics that they set up, and learn to accept some of that. So we're part of nature. We're not separate from it. It's not something pretty over there that we look at and we go engage in when we want to. It's all around us. The urban forest is all about ecosystem services, cleaning pollution, not allowing flooding to happen, all these things. And that doesn't happen unless we're part of it, we're engaged with it. So that's some of the messaging I hope we get across. This is another good quote. In the end, we only conserve what we love only love what we understand. We all have very strong values about trees out there, but think for a minute, how many people don't? How many people can you talk to? Tree ambassadors, amazing. I love tree ambassadors. I hope it goes on, because you guys are the face that then go out and talk to people about trees. But think about how many people don't think about trees on a daily basis. So we're here as ambassadors, we're here as messengers. We need to continue to promote the urban forest as something that's valuable to us. So I'm a longtime tree hugger. I never realized I was a tree hugger. You know, I grew up in New England. This is what I miss most right now, is fall. New England fall colors, amazing. I can't get over how much I miss that. And the other thing is, everyone thinks of New England as this crowded, dense area. This is kind of where I grew up. Rural areas, the town commons, all these things that have trees involved with them. My first tree was the American beech tree. I went to the University of Massachusetts and saw a beech tree that I couldn't even get my hands around. I hung out there a lot when times got tough. I also worked for the Audubon Society, but I didn't start looking at birds or identifying birds or thinking about birds until I joined the Audubon Society. But I always had an affinity towards birds. I remember as a little kid, a great horned owl flying over my head. I didn't know it was a great horned owl until I got to college or got here and understood, oh yeah, that was probably a great horned owl that flew over my head. So these experiences that we have as children are very important. So for me, I just kind of wrote down words, you know, Maple Street and Oak Street in New England, it actually means you have big maple trees and oak trees on your street. It's not that they named the development after the trees that they cut down. So there's this huge element for me. Fall colors, hillsides, streams, trout, great horned owls. Fall, Thanksgiving, apple orchards. All these things to me connote the urban forest and connote trees for me. So it's hard for me to grasp when people cut down trees because it's not in my value system. But trees get cut down. They do, and we have to understand that. The urban forest, you know, like I just said in my presentation earlier, as I started, you know, I've been eating, sleeping, living the urban forest for a long time. I've seen a lot of different sides to it. Urban trees have it hard. You know, we all know Dutch elm disease came through and wiped out all those trees. And in New England, where I grew up, they started replacing a lot of those trees that died of Dutch elm with sugar maples. Well, winter comes and we put salt on the roads, and all the salt killed all the sugar maples. So we have this continual cycle of trying to help trees survive in the urban environment, if you will. But it means it's tough for these kinds of things. And the other thing is that urban trees are, not, to me, not the same as the rural trees. They need to be maintained. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. People raise their hands if it's true and leave your hands up. So how many people are homeowners in Seattle? How many people have trees on their property? How many people in the last 10 years had a professional arborist come in and take care of those trees or look at those trees? Oh. See, you guys are the choir. Everybody. How many people do you think in Seattle can say that same thing though? Think about it. How many people in Seattle have had an arborist look at their trees in the last 10 years? Come on, seriously, not many. So this is part of the education. This is part of what needs to happen as part of the urban trees. And trees are going to get cut down, whether we like it or not. Development's going to happen, disease is going to happen, storm's going to happen. They're going to outgrow their spaces. You know, these things happen. We have to be kind of ready for that and put ourselves in those shoes. My humble opinion, and you guys kind of demonstrate it, you're in the know, you know an arborist needs to come in and work on your trees, but I also think we all accept a little bit higher risk. We're all ready to say, you know, that storm, it's going to knock down some limbs, it's going to do some things, but you know what? That's what happens. But again, put yourself in the other people's shoes. How many people freak out when a limb falls on their yard or something like that? So again, just the complexity. The issue is much more complex, I think, than we give it credit sometimes. This is my mantra of protecting the urban forests in the city of Seattle or anywhere. We have 3 circles. We have regulations, we have plantings, we have maintenance. And there's all kinds of things. Maintenance could include invasive removal and restoration and all that stuff, but these are the 3 big circles for me. And I really think, you know, whether those circles are all the same size or some of them are smaller or bigger, I still think we have to have a balanced plan, something balanced that helps all of these move forward in the same direction. And I think right now this is where Seattle is. You know, a little tiny circle for regulations. Everything's about planting. We can just plant and fix everything by putting more trees in. And then there's maintenance. You know, we can blame city council and the mayor for not putting enough money into maintenance. We can blame DPD for, you can cut down that tree and just plant more trees. And we can also blame whoever for not having strong regulations. But I think that's where we are. And it's how big we want those circles and how intersecting we want those circles. But I want, the one message tonight is to remember, regulations are not the only thing we can do. We have to have all the circles working together in one time. The regulations, to me, only get to those people that are going to do something bad to begin with. You know, that's who you want to stop. So the other one is education, and helping people understand the value is key to me too. And then there's all these other things that get layered on that. I don't care how good the regulations are. If you don't enforce them, they're not going to make a difference, right? We need to do outreach and help people. There's a lot of homeowners out there that have giant trees on their property that don't know how to call an arborist or can't afford it. So how do we help them with some assistance that gets them that? So there's all these interconnected kinds of things, I think, that happen. So I have a little test for you all, and you're all in choir, so you're all going to answer it exactly the way you're supposed to. But I'm trying to collect some information. So let's say this is your house. Let's say, I know most of you are longtime Seattleites or live in the area. Let's say you just moved here, and you just bought this house. And this house has 3 great trees on it, a cedar, a Doug fir, and a horse chestnut. And these are really important trees to you. We all love trees. They're all there. You wake up one Sunday morning in February, or first of all, this is kind of what people always ask, what size. This is about a 30-inch Douglas fir,
right,
even though there's a couple small firs next to it. And you can never get a 30-inch Douglas fir all in one frame. I guarantee that. You can't take a picture of one tree unless you step back like 400 feet, which I couldn't do. You wake up Sunday morning in February and this happens, right? A big branch falls across, maybe it hits your car, maybe it hits your driveway, and you all have little slips of paper I put on your thing. We're going to do a little quiz. I want you to answer the questions. So the first one is, when you wake up Monday morning and you see this Douglas fir branch across your driveway, what do? You get a little nervous and think that tree might be hazardous and cut it down? You say, what the heck? Storms happen, branches fall, I'm just going to clean it up and be done with it. Or 3, you call a certified arborist to come in and help you out. So answer the question. I'm going out and talking to several different groups and trying to get a collection of data that I can help us move forward on. This is my college degree coming in. I want to get some data.
Certified by whom?
By you. See, second time I use that.
International Society of Arborists.
There you go, International Society of Arborists. We have a true tree person here.
Can you put more than one answer down?
You can put more than one answer down, absolutely. We're not the people running for president right now. We can change our mind. All right, moving on. I thought I had the second question in here. We'll have the second question in a little bit. So the next step for me is being the bird guy, being the habitat guy, being all this, is we tend to focus on single trees a lot. And single trees obviously are really important. We know mature trees, large mature trees, have much more value than small little trees that we plant. But we can still look at this in the single tree context, or we can kind of look at things, how do we improve habitat? How do we look at understory? How do we look at maybe creating a snag? Maybe we look at creating groves. So I want to put out there that it's much more than trying to go out there and save one tree. That's very important. One tree makes a big difference. But as we're all the choir, as I keep saying here, we need to move out and kind of, we're the experts. We're the ones that help people understand that habitat matters. We're the ones that help people expand that message. And my first day on the job, this was one of the slides given to me 9 years ago. This is what it's all about. People go out and plant backyard certified wildlife gardens, and they create layers of habitat that are both vertical and horizontal, and everything's solved, right? So these are very important things. And again, as the bird guy, what I like to point out all the time is, Seattle and a lot of our urban areas are all this shrub layer or maybe the lower canopy layer, but it's very few when we have 3 big trees on our property. Some people do. And these are the most common birds. We see bush tits and wrens and towhees and song sparrows all the time. But how many times do we see band-tailed pigeons fly through our neighborhood? Not too often. How many times do we see a lot of owls and hawks? These are the hidden birds that are really a little bit harder. We see them, obviously, they're around, but they're much more rare. They're not the same as the song sparrows that are all over the place. So we can start looking at that quality of habitat that looks at diversity, that looks at health, that looks at all these things that I think, at least I am, trying to really get to the bottom line. And this is kind of what it matters. It does matter. Individual actions do matter. What we all do, whether it is writing a letter to the council about fixing the ordinance, or whether it's doing a certified backyard garden, it matters what we all do. So I think that's really a key message. The little yellow circle is a Downy Woodpecker. Not super rare in this area, but it's going to hang out in higher quality habitat. It's going to hang out in riparian areas. It's going to hang out in those areas that we kind of keep, not necessarily pristine, but we keep intact. All right, question number 2, backside of your page. We're all in the know. maybe this is something we want to do, right? Maybe we want to increase the habitat around the edge, this dark green. Maybe we might even consider turning that horse chestnut into a snag, like we said, because it's not, I don't know if they officially called it an invasive tree or not, but a horse chestnut's not kind of the tree a lot of people are saying are in this area. Maybe we want to do a rain garden to collect some of that water so Meadowbrook doesn't flood. You guys all know what I mean by that. That was my first job. And as the bird guy, we're going to put in this great little hummingbird garden. So, you know, all that happens. So we all answered C on the previous answer, that we called in the certified arborist. After that limb fell, the certified arborist came in and he gives you these choices. He says, I can prune all 3 of those trees, no problem. It'll cost you some money, but we can prune them all. They're not hazardous. They're great trees. We save them. That's number A. Would you take your chances and do nothing? Because he's not going to prune them for free. I actually had a little talk with a few arborists, and let's say that those 3 trees, because I set you up, right? You just bought that property. You're not in the know. You bought that property and no one did anything to those trees for 30 years. They have never been maintained. So now it's going to cost you $1,000, $15 to prune each of those trees, maybe because they're 30 in diameter. So that's a $4,000 bill you're looking at, right, to prune those trees. But do you take his advice and prune those trees? Do you take your risk and do nothing because you can't afford it or because trees are trees? Would you consider removing one of those trees? Or would you do kind of what we said in the last slide and say, hey, I'm going to make this really great wildlife garden and maybe turn that into a snag, or reduce the risk of that horse chestnut maybe crashing down in a storm and create this kind of habitat. So no right or wrong answers. I did this last at my membership meeting. I had 6 people circle every single one. I'm not sure if that's what I was looking for, but that's okay. All right, back to the presentation. So I already set you guys up, I already talked about this. You know, my job really is to how do people fall in love with their urban forest? How do people fall in love with birds? How do they understand that they're part of nature, not separate from it? And, you know, the biggest one for me is experience it. You know, Seattle Audubon does a great job with this. We have an educational program that takes little kids out into the field and shows them worms and picks through dirt and does all this stuff. And the whole nature deficit disorder that Richard Liu brought up in his books. This is all really important stuff, and I think adults fall into this a little bit too. We don't experience it. And I'm sure all of us in this room have experienced it, but some haven't. And then the other thing is help them understand that trees are infrastructure. This is the biggest thing as part of the Urban Forestry Commission that I'm working on. People really do think trees are those pretty things over there that I look at or they're expendable, but they actually filter air pollution. They remove carbon. They store stormwater. I did a quick analysis. The 30-inch Douglas fir in the Seattle Audubon's Nature Shop removes over 4,000 gallons of stormwater a year. That's 4,000 gallons of water that don't go onto the pavement, wash off all the dirt and everything that all the cars go by and drive, goes into the sewer system, goes into Thornton Creek, goes into Lake Washington. 4,000 gallons of water a year that Douglas fir removes. That's pretty remarkable. That's huge. But again, how do we really get city or other people to understand that? You guys all understand the Meadowbrook issue, that they're expanding that. I asked the SPU engineer, how many trees would it take to plant to not have to expand that? And she just laughed at me. No way could we ever plant enough trees that I could justify that we wouldn't have to do that development, or expand that pond. So that's kind of the dilemma we're up against. That's kind of what we're working against. And then help them connect the fact that trees are a part of their quality of life. So this is what Canopy Connection, switching, we're trying to do all this. And I have this little flow chart where we provide information to folks. They get awareness of that information. Then they get an appreciation or understanding of what that all means. And then there's a sense of connectivity. That sense of connectivity is that kind of light bulb that goes off. Wow, that tree and me are connected. It does matter. And then we engage. They engage, or they want to engage. And the really cool thing about this is after that light bulb goes off, that sense of connectivity and engagement, once everyone gets that, they become the ones that provide the information. So it's not top down. I'm considered top down sometimes as an Audubon guy. Yeah, I come into someone's community and tell them what to do. But once this happens, people start talking about it, and it kind of becomes that peer-to-peer interaction, which I think is so important. Tree ambassadors, huge, because you're telling your neighbors. It's not someone who gets paid to tell them. So it's a very important transition for me. I'm not sure how many people know about Canopy Connections. We pilot tested it in Columbia City. We just got another grant to do a little bit more, but basically we're trying to get to do fun and positive things in folks' neighborhoods. we are, one of the main goals is to help get all neighborhoods up to the 30% tree canopy cover, which the city of Seattle has set as their bar. Whether you like that goal or not, that's, you know, I think that's a good goal to shoot for. And the really important thing for me is it's neighborhood based. It's something you can do in your neighborhood positively that affects your neighborhood. So what I always talk about is, we got this big tree ordinance, or we've got canopy cover that says, right now the city of Seattle has about 23% tree canopy cover. Who the heck cares? How much tree canopy cover does my neighborhood have? I don't care about the whole city. So we can start looking at neighborhood level issues and try to really connect folks to their neighborhood. So I spent a lot of time in the last year and a half using GIS, Geographic Information Systems, a data analysis package, and there's 89 designated neighborhoods in Seattle, and I did tree canopy cover for every single one of those neighborhoods. So every single one of those neighborhoods has a map like this that says how much tree canopy cover you have. It not only does it for 2009 that you have here, but it does it for 2011 too, so we have 2 points. So I think it was a lot of time. I think it's fun, and it's going to make a lot of difference. The other thing what we did is, I did a quick back of the napkin calculation of, if we planted trees in the right of way, how many trees could we plant? So each neighborhood also has a calculation of how much small trees could be put in the right of ways, or how much larger trees could be put in the right of way. And all this other data that you see, we can go into detail later, but the city has goals by land use, so that breaks it out into by land use, so we know how much tree canopy we have that way. What we also did though was we put the data into what I would still call a black box, and it spit out some ecosystem service numbers for us though. It says air pollution removal. So that Dale Ridge neighborhood actually has over 36% tree canopy cover. So you saw that was the golf course and other areas, so there was a lot of tree canopy cover there. But what that tree canopy does is remove almost 22,000 pounds of air pollution a year. And it sequesters almost 82 tons of carbon a year. So we can start putting some real numbers on this canopy. But that's Dale Ridge, North Dale Ridge. Great neighborhood, great tree canopy. What if we go to a neighborhood like Brighton? How many people know where Brighton is? Southeast, correct. Southeast, a little bit lower than Seward Park. Brighton neighborhood has 13% tree canopy cover. So this, I think, hits home, right? So this really gets us to start thinking about neighborhoods that we have opportunities to plant more trees. It focuses on the positive. We can really go in there and work with these neighbors. We can also look at the numbers. 5,000 pounds versus 22,000 pounds of air pollution. 19 tons of carbon versus, 82 tons of carbon. So we can start really looking at some of these numbers. So it's fun. So we have all this data available for folks if they want it. In Columbia City, we tried to pilot it. I don't have this data for the whole city. I barely have it for Columbia City. But can we go down to the block level and say, for each block, how much tree canopy do you have? So all that dark green is folks that have blocks of tree canopy that's greater than the city's goal of 30%. The light green is a little bit less, between 20 and 30, and the red is people that are way under 18%. So as a wildlife guy, there's that corridor coming right in that green, right? That dark green. If we get to that red block way up in the top corner, maybe we can get a connected canopy of green. So again, it gets us in the opportunity to really talk to neighborhoods. But God, this is labor intensive, right? Every single block wanting to do this. So this is why I have AmeriCorps. We're trying to get to some point. I think this is pie in the sky. I don't think this is ever going to really happen, this block by block. But we have the neighborhood data, and we have the opportunity for folks to kind of go in there and do stuff. Steve's heard this one over and over again. We got a DNR grant that gave us a small amount of money to do a tree wiki. I ran into some major technical snags. That's why I say Steve's heard this over and over again, because it's not launched yet. But we're hoping very soon to get an online tree wiki that allows all of you to go in and put your tree data in there. So I think it's coming. I just got Nolan Runquist of the city to give me all the street tree data, so we're going to put that on there. So our tree wiki will be populated with the street trees at least, and then it's going to be up to all of us to put our backyard trees in, or our front yard trees in.
What's a wiki?
So a tree wiki is just like the Wikipedia stuff on the internet. It means any of you can go add data to it. So we're going to have a form that you go in and say, yep, I know where the tree is. You kind of put a push pin on the map. It says that's where the tree is, and then you fill in all this data. You fill in how big it is, what species it is, all that kind of stuff. I'm looking at some other data, like one of the big things that I want to do as an advocate, I want to know if that tree's been cut down as well. So we're going to have a little pull down that it's a stump or it's something like that, so we can start tracking some of that stuff. The other cool thing about a tree wiki is that you don't have to know all the data. You don't have to put it all in at one time. It can sit there without the data for a while. This one doesn't have trunk diameter or anything that I put in. But Steve can then go in and say, yeah, I went by and measured that tree, and I can put it in. So we have to rely on the citizens to do it, so there's a little bit of quality control, but I think we're kind of letting the public tell us what's going on. So I think this is going to be really important. And as we go to the tree ordinance and see if there is going to be a registration system or a permit system or whatever, we can do it through here. So I think it's really exciting. I'm really excited about this one. But technical difficulties have really struggled a little bit with it. The other thing is we're trying to do some block surveys. This came up before the Tree Wiki, where we could get 2 or 3 or 4 people and they could walk around their block and they could record information. How wide is your planting strip? Is there overhead wires? And I was thinking about giving a gold star out to the lot that has the best wildlife garden, so we can start promoting these kinds of things. So this is still on our radar. What I'm envisioning is people will walk their neighborhood and maybe do the Tree Wiki first, just record the trees in the right of way, that's really easy. Then they might walk it again and record the data for each individual lot or some other thing. So there's a way that we can build the data over time. And this is what it's all about. This is the picture's worth 1,000 words, right? This is a real area, probably pretty close to here, in Seattle. And look at all those trees that make this interconnected corridor of trees, right? Yeah. Really cool. But look at the other thing, right? Every single one of those trees is on a private lot. Oh. Every single one of those trees could be cut down in current rules or wherever we go. There's still going to be danger to cut down. In addition, you see lots like this, a big giant lot covered in trees. What's going to happen when that goes to development? So we can start thinking about things and getting ahead of this, with all this information about tree wikis and Canopy connections. People can start kind of taking on ownership of those backyard spaces. This tree canopy may be all in private ownership, but it's all in someone's backyard. So if they all get together and think about it, maybe we get an arborist from Plant Entity come in for free and do a health evaluation of some of those trees. Maybe we get the city to pay for some pruning costs. Maybe we do a conservation easement on it. There's all these kinds of ways that we can start looking at a collective way to look at this urban forest. Because the big dilemma for me is that trees, no matter what ordinance you do, no matter what you do, everything's always regulated lot by lot by lot by lot. And it's up to us as the community to start talking about this as multiple lots, as an interconnected corridor forest. And that's a ton of work. That's a ton of work. But it's something I think we want to strive for. This is my favorite slide. Why is this my favorite slide? Oh, wow. Tell me, why is this my favorite slide?
The sidewalk.
Absolutely. Some engineer who built that sidewalk decided that tree was more important than put a straight sidewalk in and bent the sidewalk around the tree. Yeah. That doesn't happen. That hardly ever happens. I've never seen it happen except for this. And you know why? Because this project costs like $6 million. All right. Questions? You guys talk to me. Tree swallow yelling at me. Who's ever up next? I'm done. Thanks.
Well, that was the fun part. Now we're going to talk about the proposed tree ordinance from DPD. Does everybody have a copy of a synopsis of what they're proposing? We tried to hand them out to everybody. Does everybody need one? Everybody got it? Okay. So we need to get going and rebuilding our tree canopy now, right? It's at about 23%, and it's been like that for 5 or 6 years. It's not really changing, and we're trying to get it up to 30%. So if we keep doing what we've been doing, we're not going to get there. And what DPD is proposing is actually less than what we've been doing. So we need to get started on it, and the longer we put it off, the more it's going to cost and the harder it's going to be to do. So right now, so DPD needs our advice. And the proposal they've put forth now has 2 parts. One is for when we're in circumstances of construction, relies on green factor. And they have put a lot of energy and thought into green factor, and they're very proud of it, and justifiably. They're Seattle's the first city in country to use green factor, which has been developed in Malmö, Sweden, and in Berlin, Germany primarily. And I and a Swedish lawyer friend of mine spent a long time combing the web trying to find what are they doing about trees in Malmo. It's all about green, but where are the trees? And you look at pictures, and what happened was they built it all up in a flat place that had been farming. There were no trees. And so then when they wanted to do green, they just green walls, green roofs, green wherever they can get it in. But they're working on biotopes or ecosystems. They're trying to build ecosystems, but the trees seem to be mostly deciduous and mostly on public property. Berlin is a little bit different. They have a strict tree policy. And I mean, it doesn't sound very strict, but trees over about 30 inches in diameter are protected. And if you take out a tree that's protected, you have to replace it, hopefully on site as much as possible. And you have to replace the eco value of the tree that you took out. So a 30-inch tree might require you to plant 4 trees. And those replacement trees are protected for 4 years. You have to keep that tree going, and if anything happens to it, you have to plant another one. And anytime you take out a protected tree, you have to match it in eco value. You can't just do 2 for 1 or 1 for 1. You have to do up to 4 trees. So we're not getting that here. The way Green Factor is going to work here, it does tilt toward trees, which is really good. It encourages trees. You get more points for evergreens. That's the most points you can get is for a large evergreen. And then it tapers off for smaller trees, the number of points you can get. Once you have that certificate of occupancy, you can take them all out. You can never build there because it goes on the title that that's tree area. You can't build there, but if you take them out, you could put in an unpermitted patio or whatever you want to do. And we talked this over with DPD last night at another meeting, and he said they can come after you if a neighbor complains. So the only follow-through is if a neighbor complains about something a person does. So it's really lacking in that regard. And it's a very complex system. It's better than it was in the last proposal because even lots under 5,000 square feet have to comply with it now. So that's where they put all their energy. And then for the rest of, that's for 1% of properties in any given year are under development. So these rules apply to 1% of properties. Everybody else, trees are protected if they're in environmentally critical areas. That would be a wetland or a slope. And other than that, they have to be over 24 inches in diameter, regardless of species. So we could get a lot of conifers. We could get a lot of big leaf maples. We're not going to get any vine maples protected, or Pacific yew, or madrona, or dogwood, because they never get that big, almost never. A lot of non-native trees would get protected, but our native trees, especially the deciduous ones, many of them are never going to qualify. Yes.
Is there any wildlife value in the determination of the value of the tree, the eco?
None.
None?
None, no.
So they have nothing involved with the ecosystem in terms of creatures? It's just
no mention of
carbon absorption? Is that the idea for the eco?
In Great, she's talking about Britain.
Oh, you're talking about
Seattle never has.
Berlin?
No, I'm talking about Seattle now.
Yeah, okay. So there isn't anything.
Oh, in
built
Berlin, they do talk about ecosystems and biotopes.
But when they use the term ecosystem, does that just mean like human-centric?
No.
It means
Habitat.
It means habitat for other creatures.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the problems is here is that the Department of Planning and Development's mission is not to protect trees, it's to help people build things. And you really need to move the oversight to something like the Office of Sustainability and Environment, so that you have someone that's an advocate for trees. DPD is not an advocate for trees. It's kind of pathetic to me. I mean, I hear the same stuff Matt does and other urban forestry commission. DPD comes, they talk about it's too difficult for people to figure out tree species, and they even suggested they couldn't figure out what was a tree grove, and it was too difficult to figure out what a tree grove was. So, well, because there's a little bit of difficulty, we should just forget about saving tree groves as an ecological entity in the city. And I think, you know, it's really a sham what they're doing.
I mean, the DPD representative says that it's actually one of the most complex proposals out there. But Portland, Oregon, as many of you know, has just put out enacted a tree protection ordinance, and 60 pages of it are about a 2-tiered permit system. I mean, ours is beyond simple. It's like developers and architects, they can deal with green factor, but the rest of us, we can't deal with anything but 24 inches. And the reason they got to that number is because what they were doing before with the system of significant trees and so on, they were protecting about 14% of trees. So they just want to continue protecting 14% of trees, which is not going to grow the canopy, is it? I mean, you know, you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting the same thing. You're not going to get it to 30% when we're now at 23%. So, yeah, Richard Conlon, who is chairs the Committee of Sustainability and Environment, and has said that he hasn't said he won't support a permit system, but he does not want it to be the centerpiece. So we have to tread a little bit carefully around that. But I think DPD they are proposing an online permit system for these trees over 24 inches, and so we just need to say expand it and give a little more detail, maybe have different levels, different tiers for different kinds of trees, but they don't want the complexity of mentioning specific species. They just mention a few that will never be protected, like poplars and is horse chestnut on that list?
Red alder.
And red alder's on it?
Red alder and black cottonwood,
Yeah.
and I forgot two others. Bitter cherry.
Yeah.
They're not, just by definition, no matter how big they are.
Protected. People freak out about black cottonwoods because they drop in storms. Bitter cherry, I'm not sure why. And red alder, I'm not sure why either. You think we have some opportunity to protect some.
If Councilmember Conlon doesn't want the permit system to be the focus of this, what does he want to be the main focus of it?
Incentives.
Incentives.
Positive things, yeah.
Okay.
Incentives are good, and
I'm not
education
denying
is crucial, but
incentives are
I
good.
think
one of the issues here is that, you know, Richard Conlon has sort of given his opinion, and the question is, we don't have to accept his opinion. I mean, this is a process that the city is involved in, and I'm amazed at how much the Urban Forestry Commission has kind of deferred to what Richard Conlon says rather than saying what we need in the city and what works in other places, that there are a lot of other cities that have tree permit systems. And as Ruth mentioned, Portland, Oregon went through a couple-year process to come up with their ordinance, goes into effect next year, and they have the two-tiered permit system. Trees over 20 inches need to be saved, and ones between 10 and 20 inches. They also have a tree replacement policy proposed. DPD's proposal has nothing about replacing trees that you cut down. And yet the city has in the comprehensive plan, a statement of no net loss of canopy. So how can you cut trees down and not say that they have to be replaced and then feel that you're going to be increasing canopy in the city?
Right, yeah. Lost my place. Oh, there's no protections for groves anymore either, that's going away. So the habitat value is just not even part of the picture. Yeah,
What did you say? There's no protection?
for groves of trees.
For groves.
Groves.
Yeah, it used to be, 6 trees made of grove?
8. No.
8 trees?
8 trees made of
That's
grove.
gone now. Yeah, it's just very, very simple, 24-inch diameter at breast height.
And that's really important because, like at Waldo, that was one of the strengths of our arguments. Is this was a mature grove of trees. It was a little urban forest going on there, and we wouldn't have had that sort of protection to be able to fall back on. And I don't know if anybody drives by there, but every time I do, I smile that we saved it.
So, yeah, a big part of it is that they don't want to monitor anything. They say they don't have a right to go in and check people's property, which is true. I mean, you can't get away with that kind of stuff in the U.S. In Berlin, they will go and check for 4 years. In Vancouver, BC, they will go in and check for 5 years. Here, they could get around it if they would do bonds, because then people would have to prove that they kept those trees for 5 years, or however much the time was, and then they would get their money back. So there are things they could do.
I mean, David Miller makes a good point in terms of talking about this tree ordinance, as if you approach it from the idea of public safety. But you could argue that people have a right, the city has a right to go onto property to ensure that the trees are safe. I mean, there are ways around it, and the thing is whether people have the will to say, you know, we don't agree with what DPD is proposing. And I think a lot of the Seattle City Council members are sympathetic to the public, and we just have to look at what are the ways that you state this. But because DPD is suggesting this proposal, doesn't mean that's the way it should be. We saw what they proposed previously that was very, off the wall. And to have someone come in and say, it's too much work to try and figure out what a tree species is, that you can't figure out what the diameter of a tree is, so let's just not worry about trying to save these trees. I mean, right now, under the exceptional tree rule, there are about 28 native species, and under DPD's proposal, only about 7 of those would now be protected. The ones that are all smaller diameter would not be. And I don't remember the precise figure, maybe Matt remembers it, do we?
You got it, Steve.
Okay.
7 trees.
And it's just, they're like, the Douglas fir, cedar, et cetera. So it's just a few big trees, but we need the diversity within the city for, as Matt said, for the, the ecological value, the habitat value. Lots of birds associate with different tree species, as Matt's initial slide that he said when he came into Audubon shows, that there are some trees that are only up in the top of the tall trees. There's some in the middle, and there's some that go on the ground level and up. The trees are birds vary with the habitat.
They don't, it seems, I was just at a DPD proposal last night, discussion last night, and it just seems that they don't want anybody ever to have to call an arborist. It has to be so simple, you don't have to talk to a professional ever to deal with your trees if you want. And I think Seattleites are more sophisticated than that. We can do better. Portland can do it. We can do more than what DPD is proposing.
I think one of the challenges in presenting this to City Council, something that Matthew had brought up, is we have to recognize that trees are part of the infrastructure. Just as you are required to put plumbing in a home, that's important. And the City of Seattle says you can't build a home and not have plumbing in there. You can't go dump your sewage into the street. It's the same thing with trees. They offer the same sort of protection for the city as plumbing does, as sidewalks, as earthquake retrofitting. You look at pothole repair. Those are things that are infrastructure items, and trees are the same thing in the way that they keep the water. It's going to save our storm drainage system. I think when we're dealing with the city with this stuff, is we have to really sort of take that attitude of, this is infrastructure. It isn't pretty. It is pretty, but it's more than pretty. It's supporting our city. And so if you're going to write in letters, that's one of the attitudes that I found has been most effective in conversations with city council members is, this is infrastructure.
Right. If I get the impression that DPD doesn't want to incur any cost in maintaining the trees or maintaining, in following up anything. They don't want any additional bureaucracy. But it's pennies on the dollar compared to what SPU is going to have to pay for drainage and water treatment and all this other stuff. I mean, the trees are a pretty good deal compared to putting in all the gutters and sewer treatment and all that. Our creeks are a mess.
Can I say one more thing and then I will shut up? The other thing is, and I don't know how other people feel about this, I've never talked about it with Steve or anything like that, is when we're talking about the trees and they talk about evergreens get the highest number of points, I would love it if we could start using the word conifers, because there's a lot of evergreens out there that actually are sort of invasive things, and conifers, look at laurels. I mean, for God's sakes, they just.
Good point.
And so if we emphasize conifers, I mean, it offers the same benefits as the evergreens do. I would like it if I don't know if that's a particular sticking point on anything. I'll get your opinion on that.
Your same exact argument we use in the exact opposite way.
Seriously.
Because of Pacific Madrona.
Oh,
Pacific
bloody
Madrona
hell, that's
is an
right.
Evergreen, so they put everything in as an evergreen to acknowledge the benefit of Pacific Madrona.
Why
So
would
could we
they
say-
have native evergreen rather than?
Yeah, I mean, I think on a lot of
Alien and
levels,
native,
that's a
that's
good
an
point.
easy-
That's a
Yeah, I
good
think
point.
lot-
That's a
on
really
lot
good
of
point.
levels, native evergreen is implied, because the city's not saying to save laurels or something.
I know, but you get
I
a
know,
developer and he'll
yeah,
think,
I
oh,
get
I'll
it.
put in
It's kind of
evergreen.
interesting to hear you say that, though, because what you said was the exact same reason why they added evergreen.
No, that does make sense. So, okay, in your letters, just be sensitive to the issue. How's that?
Another thing they could do, that they're doing in Atlanta, Georgia, if you want to cut down a tree, you have to apply for a permit, and then you have to post it on the web and on site for 10 days or 2 weeks before you can cut that tree down, so the whole neighborhood knows that that tree is going. And people can appeal if they don't think it should go. So cutting down a tree is a public process. It is a public resource.
Portland will have an appeal process for larger trees being cut down.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the other things that's interesting to note is that DPD is saying we can't do permits, but the reality is street trees in the city of Seattle already require a permit to be pruned or removed. Not just removed, but pruned. And so it's a process that's already there. Plus, in critical areas, if you want to remove exceptional tree, you're supposed to apply for a permit. And there's actually one on the DPD's website. So saying that they can't do permits, I haven't heard a lot of people complain about permits for street trees, but they've existed for a number of years. And the posting that Ruth mentions, the trees that were cut down at Northgate, you may have noticed DPD does the posting, yellow for being taken down and green for this tree is protected. But they do it for 2 weeks, so at least you have some forewarning. It's not just one day suddenly everything's gone.
Yeah. Another thing they could do is require, when people are applying for their permits to build, they should show not only where the tree is, but how big it is, where's the drip line, and how much of a root circumference do they need to protect. And when properties are sold, realtors could be required to disclose significant trees on the property, so people know before they move in that these trees are here and they need to be cared for, and you can't just go cut them down. As it is, they don't have to say a thing, so people just kind of do what they want. So anyway, are there any questions about that? You should probably, before you start writing, have a look at the synopsis of what they're proposing, and we're all here to answer any questions too. But first of all, Cass, from Plant Amnesty. Cass is the founder of Plant Amnesty and published author of the book on pruning cows, and she's also the founder of Tree Pack.
Tree Pack, that's why I'm here. I think some of you know me as founder of Plant Amnesty, which is an organization about pruning, not tree preservation. And but there's a lot of overlap of tree lovers, and I've been kind of keeping my eye on tree preservation and tree issues in Seattle for the past 25 years, and it's been extraordinarily discouraging. Especially just the street tree ordinance, which isn't even being discussed here tonight, is being proposed once again. The same one has been being proposed every 25 years and never seems to get anywhere. But I think we're here to talk about the DPD, Department of Planning and Development ordinance that's being proposed. And the first thing everybody will agree is the Department of Planning and Development is very resistant. They don't want to do it. They really are being uncooperative, unforthcoming, and we wish it was being handled by somebody else. And they keep sort of setting the stage and calling the shots just because they're the ones who are being asked to write it. It has lots of problems, the ordinance. How many people here plan to send an email or do a letter? Everybody, right? Do you know where to send it? I have a handout that has Brennan Staley's email and his snail mail address, because for me, the biggest difference that can be made is for you to say something. And it doesn't even really matter what you say. You could pick any part of it that you don't like. You could tell a story, you could be logical, you could be emotional, you could go for the utilitarian, but they just need to hear that some people would like to see actually a stronger ordinance, not a weaker ordinance. Because there's going to be plenty of people, believe it or not, that are going to be upset that anybody's going to say anything that they can do about their tree. And I got to tell you, I planted my yard 27 years ago, and I have 4 full-grown small trees and 2 full-grown large trees, and it blew out my lawn. I live, of course my house is 10 degrees cooler than everybody else on the block, but I can't grow grass anymore. And I finally got tired of the yard looking so bad, and I had to decide whether or not I should take down that tree and go for the grass again. And then it occurred to me that if this ordinance went through, I might not be able to take down my own tree. And that kind of rubbed me a little wrong because I planted it, And then I thought, and so there will be some of that. There are going to be people who say, you can't tell me what to do with my own goddamn tree. But I also realized that people get used to the idea. I'm not radical tree lover. I'm sort of a moderate, believe it or not. And I'm sort of a moderate ecologist as well. And I sort of like try to train myself to take cloth bags to the store, and sometimes didn't make it, and then I would get the plastic because we like to reuse them around the house. You know, I felt a little guilty, but not too guilty. And my husband was a strict plastic guy because we like to reuse them to pack lunches. And when they were going to pass the law that we couldn't get plastic bags, you know, a lot of people went, what do you mean I can't get free plastic bags? Isn't that my constitutional right to get free plastic bags? But about the second time it came through, you know, people went, well, okay, I guess I'll get some cloth bags. And it's because in their heart they knew it was the right thing to do. And I think the same is true for, you know, like banana peels. You know, what do you mean I can't throw my banana peel in the garbage? I gotta throw my banana peel in some special sticky jar that I keep. But you know in your heart it's the right thing to do. And so you adjust. And I think people will adjust to the fact that they can't just cut down any tree. And 24 inches is a big tree. And I actually went out to my yard after this latest one came out, and I realized, you know, I could cut down all but one of my trees. The one tree that I couldn't cut down was a great big, really nice conifer that was well suited. So, you know, I could cut down and put it in my patio or grow my corn or whatever it is that the kids want to do these days. People will adjust, but the government has to hear an equal amount from people who want trees as people who are upset that somebody's telling them what they can and can't do. And you realize that if this goes through the way it is, a bunch of people are going to go down and cut down their 24-inch trees before the law goes into effect because they're just pissed that somebody's telling them what they can do with their tree. And other people are going to cut down trees before they reach the 24-inch threshold because they don't like anybody telling them what they can do with their trees, besides they want to grow tomatoes, which is, you know, I can see people wanting to do that. But it will happen that people will buy houses that either have clear land or treed land. They won't move in and cut all the trees down. That will become the way, and that will work towards more canopy cover. That it won't be your right to move into a house that has a bunch of big trees and cut it all down and then plant your grass. So the main thing is that you do anything. That you can say, I put down my grocery list of things that I'd like to see improved. But other people have other things. I said, you know, lower the diameter so more trees are protected. And something that's missing is those fiscal incentives. I think if you're going to tell people you can't cut down a tree, the next word out of your mouth is, and you'll get money off your utility bill for keeping it. You know, and it should be, you know, $60 a year, $600 a year, I don't know. But if you are doing the good, the utilitarian good of keeping trees on your property, I mean, if the city really believes trees are valuable, they ought to put their money where their mouth is. And I think just saying trees are nice, trees are nice, trees are nice, education is good. But at some point, I mean, I noticed after the plastic bag law came in that now I am mortified if I get a plastic bag at any store. You know, it has really changed my awareness of all the times I get, not just the grocery store, but all the stores. You know, I gotta carry a plastic bag with me all the time. So I think having a law is gonna push it into that next level of appreciation for trees, that it isn't just incentive and it just isn't doing the right thing. So everybody's gonna write their email, right? Write their letter. So that's all we need to know, right? Anybody got any questions for me?
Is there a time sensitivity?
Oh yeah, by the 1st.
Yeah.
You gotta go write it tonight or tomorrow morning. And there was something else. Oh, tree pack. I was so incensed that the city never gets anywhere with trees. They always chicken out at the last minute, that I started a political action committee for trees called Tree Pack. And we collect money and donate it to candidates. Because I read somewhere, I know you're gonna find this difficult to believe, and it was a revelation to me that money can influence public policy. So we haven't tried that tack yet. And if you want to join tree pack, there's a card in the back table, a $25 check lets you in the club, and we'll see if that works. Thanks.
What is it on our King County property tax thing? It's about a runoff. What is that? Drain, yeah, there's a water runoff, thing.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's on it, but it's a King County property tax.
Uh-huh.
And there's a charge for, how much of your property is not a rain absorbed.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
So they take,
Stormwater retention.
yeah, something like that.
Uh-huh.
So they take, cement and your, roof, footprint or that kind of.
Yeah, I actually have a petition that I didn't bring tonight to encourage that. They're called eco districts, where you get credits for having, is that it?
Well,
Well, that might be,
Eco-districts.
that might be an incentive place for trees because they're water absorption.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could base the incentive on the utilitarian things trees do, whether it's stormwater, cooling the city, lack of energy use in the summer, sequestering carbon. The problem is that trees do so many different things. It'd be nice to bundle it. But it's, I don't know how we would do it, but I think we need to plant the seed in, you say, we want meaningful fiscal incentives. Let them decide what's gonna work.
I would argue that this is something I think that needs discussing, because this is a kind of a conservative viewpoint, like the government has to pay me to do
Yes.
something, rather than the fact that we're the government. I mean, we're the people, this is our government, and we can decide what it does. I mean, it's kind of a philosophical thing of saying if you start asking for every good thing that you do, government somehow is supposed to pay you for it rather than it's the right thing to do. Like, should I be paid for not going 90 miles an hour through the city?
Yes.
Instead of when I go 60?
Yes, you do that with a tax on gas.
It's not quite the same. I mean, I think you can see what I'm trying to say. I don't think everything needs to be paid for. I mean, one of the
A
proposals,
utility tax credit.
one of the
If
proposals.
I'm not polluting the streams and I'm keeping the city cool, why should I pay as much as, the people in Ennisartan?
I think if you did a system where people applied, but not asking the city to go do all properties, but instead if you have a
Oh, yeah,
significant
no,
number of trees,
it could be,
that you apply for it. If you
I
want it.
apply for a permit to take my tree down, they say no, I apply for my credit. So that it isn't a blanket thing all at once, which would kill the bank, break the bank, if we tried to do it all at once, yeah?
Well, you got rain wise, and they're getting rebates for people who live in rain.
So, it would be nice, trees. And I think there is that feeling that trees are ornamental, not utilitarian. So I think continuing to hit, some famous guy once said we need trees if they were ugly and smelled bad. If you had to build something that does what trees do and pay to have it built and pay to have it maintained, people had a lot more respect for trees, but they seem to grow effortlessly. Anything else?
So I handed out, even though you guys have been bombarded with stuff, I handed out the action alert that I sent out to my members yesterday with our talking points that I've asked our membership to respond to. So you guys can feel free to add another layer of information to your packet.
Thank you.
And just follow up on Cass's, Seattle Public Utilities attempted to do utility rebates for tree folks. There was a lot of discussion around it, and it kind of stalled out. So I think it's time to reinvigorate it. It stalled out because of two reasons. Scientifically, they couldn't prove they didn't feel comfortable putting a number on how much you should get back. And the other one was they figured out it would cost way too much money to incentivize people to be able to do it. So they're in the process.
Well, it could be like,
Yeah, they're
if you
trying to figure out
have
how to
over
do it.
50%
Right.
canopy in
Oh,
your
yeah.
yard,
Yeah.
then you get.
No, I totally agree with you, and I
Yeah.
think that's why I put my last slide up of all the trees connected. I think where we need to go is give a whole block a utility rebate. If everyone decides to come together and puts kind of trees in a conservation easement or something like that, then they get a pretty big rebate or something back like that. So I think there's a lot of avenues. There's, you know, as I started earlier, they've been living this a lot. Everything that's brought up here is great ideas, but we have to be able to get into the details, and I don't know how we do that. How do we get the city to talk about details? How do we do that? So I think it's interesting, and you know, as a plug for the Urban Forestry Commission, we have a lot on our plate. It's a lot of tough work, but hopefully we can get to diving into some of these things with a little bit more detail.
And one of the things I noticed Thornton was just doing was they were actually, through their utility, was saying that people block trees and they would rebate half the cost of the tree. For people planting trees, there's like a 2-month window or something that they were going to do it for. But that's another way to encourage people to plant trees in their backyard in the first place.
The neighborhood canopy survey that you have for 2009 and 2011, is that up on the web somewhere?
No, but give me a call, I can get you maps.
Okay.
I hope to get them up on the web, but the problem is there's 89 neighborhoods and 89 PDFs, and just
Yeah.
a lot of work. I actually started and put a lot of them up, but then our website kind of couldn't handle it. So,
Yes.
and then part of it is that you just see a PDF and it's hard for you to really see anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing that we haven't discussed, that Steve probably knows and brought up, is that this canopy cover analysis is very generalized. I'm not trying to say it's exact, and we need a lot of ground truthing to go on. So there are laurel. So laurel probably counts as trees
I
sometimes,
know.
or other things, because all you do is take an aerial photograph and look down. But the good thing is that we have data for 2 years that we can start looking at trends. And then we can go into a neighborhood and say, neighborhood by neighborhood or block by block, here's what we think you have, why don't you help us determine what you really
Right,
have?
right.
So I think that's where the canopy cover comes in, tree wiki adds to it, neighborhood block adds to it. So there's a part of me that hesitates a little bit to release the data wholesale and say, here it is, because I don't want people coming back to me saying, that's not a tree, that's an invasive laurel. I'm like, yeah, probably is. But we missed that tree over there too, so does it balance out a little bit in the end? So it's interesting, it's fun.
I forgot to mention that if you're phobic about writing letters and emails, like
Get over it.
many people are, we all write the letters in our heads, but do we ever send them out? Plantamnesty.org has a homepage at plantamnesty.org, and on that homepage is a button that you push called Take Action Now. And there is a pre-written email that's pre-addressed that you can change. You know, you add your name and your address to it, and just hit the button, and it gets sent to all the council and the mayor. You know, if you get paralyzed, that's a good way to do it. And it counts. Doesn't count as much as the handwritten
What
scrawl.
if you do it 3
That's what we're
times?
doing tonight. We're handing out
The handwritten
postcards.
scroll, I believe, is the best.
Yeah.
And the plaintiff's story, I think, really, you know, my neighbor cut down the tree which I watched a sparrow raise her young in. And now I have to have air conditioning.
Probably would have been dead tree, but that's okay.
Okay. But, you know, anything, just any one sentence. Please strengthen the tree regulations. Please strengthen the DPD ordinance. Yeah.
What were some of those things you did that trees save us money because?
What stormwater
What about
retention? We
stormwater?
don't have to build bigger sewer systems
Why not?
because the trees,
The tree drinks it.
yes, they absorb the water through the root system and expire it. And they also slow it down so the rain doesn't all of a sudden hit the pavement, it just kind of slowly drips out of the tree. Air conditioning, if your house is 10 degrees cooler like mine is, you don't have to blow through the energy with air conditioning, which is also bad for global warming.
Air pollution?
Air pollution, both smog gets cooked. And so if you have a cooler place, you don't have as much smog. Also particulates, you know, your industry, like the cement industry has particulates. The trees collect all that particulates on their leaves and then drop it in the fall and you rake it up. So it kind of acts like a dust mob.
Also-
Property values are higher. And, you know, global warming. You know, it's so hard because it's so diffuse. You know, it's such a huge problem, but it sequesters carbon.
Especially after our summer.
Yeah.
Especially what?
After this summer.
Yeah.
I grew up in Seattle, we never had 100-degree days.
Well, you know, things like the air pollution, I know everybody always talks about that, but you can look at hard dollars of how air pollution has cost us money simply in the covering of the reservoirs in the city. Because initially they had to cover them because of air pollution was causing the water to be so dirty that the filter system had to work overtime. And so they were gonna do soft covers on them at first. And that's because our air quality is so poor.
Do you have some articles on that? That'd be interesting. I did not know that.
I will see what I can find and pass
that's
along to you.
cool.
But yeah, it's really, you know,
I've never heard
it's
that.
hard dollars. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, not just.
Yeah.
And we've lost 50% of our cover in the last 50 years.
And you can see
Yeah.
the stuff in the air if you just leave your car outside and, you know, it gets dirty.
Yeah.
You don't have to drive it, you just
Yeah, it
being
gets
there, it
filthy.
gets dirty. Which means that's all in the air coming out.
And I don't know why I have to be the voice of reason, but sometimes trees antagonize air.
Oh, well, there is that little
Some-
pollen problem.
Some trees do that, but yeah, there's I think that kind of what you said and what Steve said is really interesting. I had a friend that lived in an apartment complex
So we're
right
ready
along
to
like
see
I-5,
that.
and they couldn't even open their windows because there'd be a layer of soot that just was on there. So if we plant trees
Oh.
along highways, there's a whole bunch of
Go
studies
through
that
the
come
whole
out. If we just focus on planting trees along highways, we'll reduce air pollution impact by like 40, 50, 60%, just
Yeah.
focusing on there. So that's cool. And it's, yeah.
Oh, so now we're gonna have a quiet moment and we're all gonna write on the back of our cars.
And we have
Sorry,
extra
I already
cards
did
and extra
mine
addresses
yesterday.
if you don't get done on one.
I already did mine yesterday.
I have a
You
letter.
can
I'm
do it,
working
I
on
know
at
you
home.
can. Then you're gonna take it home and it won't be good enough. So you'll stick it on your shelf, you won't send it in.
Are we gonna hand them in tonight or we're mailing them ourselves? Okay.
And to give people a little bit more motivation, I actually had a meeting with Brent Staley today, and he's getting a lot of comments and I think, fingers crossed, he'll be making some changes. Might be the low-hanging fruit, but I think some changes will be coming.
Anybody need a pen?
Yeah, there's pens here. If anybody wants to actually write a full letter, we have paper, and we have envelopes, so.
We have
you can-
stamps.
We have stamps.
Yeah,
We have
we're gonna
stamps.
we'll put
Oh, so
stamps.
the deal is you don't get to leave the room until you hand us your postcard or letter.
Yeah,
Yeah. It counts.
Yes.
Volume counts.